it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man I think I am at home. Oh, no, no, no. I'm a rocket man, burning out his fuse up here alone. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. Let's hear you guys do it. It's gonna be a long, long time. Try it again. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. Look at that one where it goes up high now. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. Big applause for Jimmy Capt, the Ocean. If you track him down after you get one of his great CDs, definitely worth getting. So we get started here. Of course, I'm Joe Noriel, president of the museum, and we're so happy to see you all today. Some thank yous. We couldn't do this without a lot of people. Special thank you to Tiffany Mitchell, Lisa Vanderbloom, Steve Villano, Rose Welch, all the great folks over at IONS, and great folks over at the museum. Thank you so much for everything, for putting this together. A special thank you to the Masons. The use of this beautiful building. They're a wonderful community partner. And with that, I'd like to introduce Christopher Wright.
Thank you very much, Joe. Friends, brothers, members of the community, on behalf of the men of Petaluma Hamilton Lodge, number 180, free and accepted Masons of the state of California, I would absolutely love to welcome you to our lodge. My name is Christopher Wright, and as worshipful master of the lodge, it's my responsibility and privilege to lead over 160 men, all local here to Petaluma, as we work to make ourselves and our community a better place. Over about 1,000 years ago, the Stonemasons Guild began erecting marvelous monuments, castles and palaces, cathedrals and statues on behalf of kings, princes, potentates, and religious figures all across the world. Not beholden to any one sovereign, they were soon known as free Masons because they did travel the world over. Over the next millennia or so, they practiced their craft, improving it, and encouraged a rigorous understanding of the sciences, particularly geometry, rhetoric, and astronomy. Around the 18th century, the fraternity changed its focus and allowed men who were not operative stonemasons to join, to enrich themselves and their brothers, to improve their communities, no matter what walk of life they came from. In 1855, Petaluma was rapidly expanding to support the growth of San Francisco to the south, and our lodge was chartered and established, more than 3 years before Petaluma actually became a town. When people ask me how long have the Masons been helping Petaluma, I'm very proud to say, from the very beginning. 130 years ago, the building in which we now sit was constructed. It formed the cornerstone of Petaluma's downtown and has for over a century. Ever since, it has been one of Petaluma's most recognized landmarks, and we're proud to say that we've been keeping the doors open for good Petaluma men from day one. 40 years ago, America sent Masons to the moon, inspiring generations of scientists, architects, engineers, and pilots to reach for the stars and to never stop studying science. Today, Masons in America continue the rich tradition of promoting education and community improvement through our scholarships, donations to public schools, the Shriners Hospitals, and uncountable other charitable works. All in all, Masons in America donate over $2 million to charity a day. I, for one, am extremely proud to belong to and have a part in such a rich history, both globally and locally. We can't all walk on the moon, but each of us endeavors through our actions to make this world a better place. Dr. Mitchell, you have many, many titles, all very well earned. But the one that means the most to me, and that makes me proudest to share this stage with you, is brother. Brother Mitchell, it is our honor, our sincere pride to have you here today and to celebrate your many accomplishments and to thank you for your service, both in the past and in the many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. So we're here to honor a very special individual today, but let's take a step back. Korea, 1950 to 1953. The Korean War is called the Forgotten War, which is unfortunate as our servicemen served so valiantly. They fought in the worst of conditions to protect the people they never met. Edgar's presence here in Petaluma has helped bring visibility to many Korean War veterans who came home with little recognition. The Petaluma Museum is hosting an exhibit honoring those who served, and I hope you all get a chance to go check it out. It was a lot of hard work, but it was certainly worth it to tell this amazing story. Those who serve in combat have gained a new perspective of the tragedy of war. And Edgar has been a beacon of light, reminding us the senselessness of war, and we thank him for his efforts towards world peace. If I could, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence to remember the over 3 million lives that were lost in the Korean War. The Korean War saw the use of the jet airplane, and interesting, many Apollo astronauts actually started their career there. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Jim Lovell, and aviators like Ed Mitchell made a difference in that conflict, and we're grateful for his service. Edgar Mitchell was one of the few soldiers at the time who had a doctorate. He not only flew planes, but he gave advanced mathematics and navigational lessons to the aviators who were astronaut candidates. He served with distinction, receiving the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. And Apollo. In ancient days, men looked at the stars and saw their heroes in the constellations. In modern times, we do much the same, but our heroes are epic men of flesh and blood. On a very hot late summer's day in 1962, President John F. Kennedy reaffirmed America's commitment to landing a man on the moon before the end of the 1960s. A determined nation answered the call and NASA was born. We pushed the boundaries of science, human will, and endurance, and through the Apollo program, the dream was realized. We had stood on the shoulders of giants and touched the moon. Apollo exceeded our greatest expectations and gave hope to a generation. Exploring the moon was humankind's most incredible accomplishment. But who are these men like Edgar who risked their lives for a nation's dream? We have seen these explorers before in history. Christopher Columbus, Marco Polo, Lewis and Clark. There are rare individuals who are driven to look beyond the boundaries and embrace the unknown. These brave individuals risked their own lives for a greater good. Now, quote, "In my own view, the important achievement of Apollo was a demonstration that humanity is not forever chained to this planet, and our visions go rather further than that, and our opportunities are unlimited. Mystery creates wonder, and wonder is the basis of man's desire to understand." Neil Armstrong. So how did they get there? Saturn V rocket. Some facts. Saturn V stood more than 63 feet tall, that's over 35 stories, 33 feet in diameter, weighed over 3,000 tons. Saturn V is the tallest, heaviest, and most powerful rocket ever brought into operation. To give you a sense of scale, it is 60 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty, and fully fueled for liftoff, it weighed about the same as 400 elephants. That's a big rocket. The Saturn V rocket generated 7 million pounds of thrust at launch. That's more power than 85 Hoover dams. Think of it this way. A car that gets 30 miles to the gallon could drive around the world 800 times on the fuel it took for Saturn V to transport men to the moon. That's not even today's gas prices. And those noise levels that were so intense, were so high that spectators were kept at least 3 miles away. Can you imagine anyone riding on top of a rocket like that? No way. Apollo 14, January 31st to February 9th, 1971. Astronauts Alan Shepard, Commander Ed Mitchell, Lunar Module Pilot, Stuart Roosa, Command Module Pilot. Command Module was Kitty Hawk, Lunar Module Antares. Apollo 14 lifted off on January 31st, 1971, with high hopes following the near disaster of Apollo 13. The 3 men were initially supposed to fly on Apollo 13, but were pushed back a mission to give everyone extra training. The 4th manned moonshot is most famous at the mission where the astronaut played golf. But there were other adventures the crew encountered along the way. My favorite is the establishment of the first Lunar Olympics with Ed's makeshift javelin. Apollo 14 launched smoothly, aiming for the Fra Mauro Highlands that Apollo 13 had hoped to reach. However, the astronauts ran into trouble as they were preparing to leave Earth orbit. One of the required tasks was to dock the command module against the lunar lander to fly the two crafts to the moon. The trouble was the docking latches didn't work. After a suggestion from Mission Control to fire Kitty Hawk's thrusters hard and push the ships together, the latches locked successfully. Landing on the moon didn't come easily for the astronauts either. Antares' radar did not work until almost the last minute, and it would violate NASA's rules if Antares could not calculate its distance to the moon. Once that was sorted out, an on-target landing was made. Shepard's first word when he walked on the surface was, "It's been a long way, but we're here." That's over 239,000 miles from us. Mitchell scrambled down after him, and the two got busy setting up experiments on the surface of the moon. They searched for evidence of an asteroid that carved a large crater in the moon. And to help them carry more rocks and equipment, for the first time, the crew had a small handcar that they carefully wheeled around the surface. 69 miles above, Mitchell and Shepard, Russo took pictures of the moon, working through a signed list of targets. It was a very successful mission. And traveling 24,000 miles an hour, Ed, the human meteorite, returned home with 95 pounds of the moon. Apollo 14 splashed down on Earth February 9th, and after the ruckus Apollo 13 caused, Apollo 14 helped the program regain its confidence. So with great pride today, we honor Edgar Mitchell. He gave the world hope and inspiration. With that, I'd like to introduce our mayor, David Glass.
Thank you. It is indeed an honor to be here today. One of the things that I enjoy the most about being mayor is the opportunity to have a chance to meet people that have made a difference in this world. And certainly today we have Dr. Mitchell with us, and what a difference he and his cohorts at NASA have made, and the folks that he served with in the Korean War. It is an honor to read City of Petaluma's proclamation to Dr. Edgar Mitchell for Edgar Mitchell Day, October 27th, 2012, and it reads, whereas Dr. Edgar Mitchell joined the Navy in 1952, where he trained as a pilot and launched and landed single planes from the aircraft carriers USS Bonhomme Richard and USS Ticonderoga. He served his country honorably in the Korean War, receiving the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. And whereas on January 31st, 1971, Navy Captain Dr. Edgar Mitchell embarked on a journey into outer space as lunar module pilot on Apollo 14 with fellow astronauts Alan Shepard, Stuart Russo, and spent 9 hours working on the lunar surface in the Fra Mauro Highlands region as the 6th person to walk on the moon. And whereas through the efforts of NASA's Apollo space program, President John F. Kennedy's national goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth was met. And whereas Dr. Edgar Mitchell was presented with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1970 by President Richard Nixon, as well as receiving the NASA Distinguished Service Medal for his heroic efforts. And whereas in 1973, Dr. Mitchell continued his journey of an exploration of the mind and founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which is now based here in Petaluma. And whereas ION's mission is supporting individual and collective transformation through consciousness research, educational outreach, and engaging a global learning community in the realization of our human potential. Now therefore be it resolved that I, David Glass, Mayor of Petaluma, along with all of the members of the Petaluma City Council, do hereby proclaim today, Saturday, October 27th, 2012, as Dr. Edgar Mitchell Day in the city of Petaluma. Dr. Mitchell?
I indeed feel honored to be among you today to receive this proclamation and this award. I'm just one person doing what they think best. My motto has been for many years, serve the greater good And that's what I strive to do every day. I feel privileged to have had the past that I've had. A lot of it was happenstance. I really wasn't planning to go into the Korean War, except I was about to be drafted. And I preferred to choose my branch of service. And I chose the Navy, and I chose flight because I've been flying since I was 13 years old and already had a pilot's license. So it seemed the right thing to do, and it worked out fine. However, the Korean War ended while I was in the Pacific, but I had already been designated to come back to test pilot school and to become a test pilot, which I did. And about that time was when Sputnik went up. And I said, well, that sounds like a nice thing to do, a good thing to do. Maybe I ought to try that one also. And that worked out that I was selected into the astronaut program in 1966 after a successful career as a test pilot and getting a PhD from MIT in aeronautics and astronautics. And so my course was somewhat set at that point in time. And I feel privileged to have represented the humans of Earth, but in particular the United States, on the Apollo 14 mission to the moon. And I realized at that point that a new path of discovery and exploration and career had been established for we humans, and that was to begin to exploring the heavens and to go eventually beyond our solar system into deeper space. And we will at some point. We must do that, since as we have learned, and many of us already know, our solar system won't last forever. And if it's a species we're going to survive, we have to eventually go somewhere else. Now, that's a long ways in the future, I trust, but nevertheless, that is the path of exploration. And each generation, each century, we have to reevaluate where we are, where we're headed, what we can do to learn to live together as a civilization of humans on this little planet we call Earth. And we have reached that point of going into space, looking back at this little Earth, and seeing how utterly magnificent it is, how beautiful it is in the larger picture of the heavens around us. And that was what the privilege I had, was to have that experience, and also my colleagues on the Apollo missions. Although they didn't necessarily have exactly the same experience I had, they all had some experience of seeing Earth from space, and we all agreed on how magnificent it was. And if our political systems and our leadership at the political levels could ever see Earth from that point of view, we'd have quite a different leadership on Earth. What that really was is the utter magnificence of seeing Earth as a little planet in the larger picture of the heavens. And I do call the epiphany I had in space regarding this the big picture effect of seeing ourselves, our planet, our situation on Earth, our life on Earth, as in a totally different way. I remind you that our ancestors, just a few hundred and even back a couple of thousand years ago, believed Earth was the center of the universe. And in this century, we have dispelled ourselves of that notion and see how much more powerful, magnificent it is, this universe that we live in. And suddenly we have a new mission to make life on this earth bearable, usable, productive, and safe place to be for all humans. And our growth and explosion of our population during the 20th and into the 21st centuries causes us to be concerned about the sustainability of where we are. And we just had talks about this at our Noetics board meeting this week again on the issue of sustainability of our civilization. And I point out to you that when we understand this issue, it's not too hard to develop the idea of let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. Let there be love and kindness on earth and service to the greater good, and let it begin with me. Because only if we do that will it become true. Thank you very much for this honor, for the privilege of being with you, for your presence here, and I hope you will join all of us in that mission to make this a better place to live, to make this civilization that we're in a global civilization of people loving and kind and serving the greater good. Thank you very much for your attention.
And to conclude our program today, a very special guest. I'd like to introduce the ION's president, Steve Alana.
Thank you very much, Joe. Chris, thank you for having us in your house. All of my brothers and sisters and my sons and daughters out there and everybody in between, we are so privileged to be here in this place, this historic place, with a 33rd degree Mason, who will certainly be here a long, long time. And I understand that Edgar's real name was Elton John Mitchell. NASA made him change it to go into space, but he rewrote the music anyway. But I do think that to just talk about Edgar as a rocket man is to miss it. It's to miss the point. Because Edgar is much more than a rocket man. Because he was building this launch pad for the first 40 years of his life. And I urge you, when we're done in this room, to stop by the impromptu bookstore we set up and purchase his autobiography, The Way of the Explorer. Because I found the first 40 years of his life equally as amazing as the next 40 years of his life. And who knows what he's going to do in the additional 40 years he's got coming. But the fascinating thing about this man is not only his humility and his humanity, but here he was and is both an historic figure and a witness to a great period in history. And I saw as this little guy who's sitting next to this woman in the white blouse, so he's got a little white t-shirt on. I saw him crawling up the road here to get a closer look at the rocket man. And it reminded me, and I loved that whole spirit of adventure, because I could see my granddaughter doing the same thing. But it reminded me of a passage in Edgar's book where he writes about living down the block from Robert Goddard, who was a rocket scientist. I mean, it was really rocket science to him. And so Edgar never met Robert Goddard, but he was inspired by him. And so, as someone probably not much older than you, I don't know whether he crawled by Robert Goddard's house, but he certainly walked by it. And it was a lasting inspiration for Edgar. And he acted on that inspiration because he knew there was much more to learn, much more beyond what he was seeing in the small town in New Mexico, where he grew up. And he grew up during a time of enormous technological change. But the fascinating thing about this man, who was a master of technology, who helped build the first lunar module with one of our friends right over here, who worked at the Grumman Corporation with my father-in-law more than 40 years ago, working on the lunar module. But the astronauts had to know everything about those machines that they were going to take into space in case something went wrong, and they had to know how to fix them. And despite that, despite his intense knowledge of technology, Edgar's passion was not to let technology override humanity. It was that human beings had to control technology and not the other way around. And think of that the next time you see everyone on their cell phones, just texting away and ignoring the person across from them and ignoring the wonderful human being that sits there. And so here's a man with a vision, even before the atomic bomb was developed, and a man who grew up not far from where the first A-bomb test was done, in the desert of New Mexico. And he knew intuitively that the better use of technology was to serve humanity, not for warfare, but to serve the welfare of humanity, to advance us all as a civilization. And so here's this man who then becomes a fighter pilot, trains to fly planes that were carrying payloads equal to the weight of an atomic bomb in case he had to do that. And he was this peace-loving person at heart who decided to devote his life to exploration and discovery and learning, and not to devote his training for the purposes of war, but for the purposes of love. And so in 1963, when a great hero to many of us who were alive then was assassinated, I asked Edgar the other day, where was he? He was studying for his PhD when President Kennedy was killed. And he was studying for his PhD in President Kennedy's hometown. He was at MIT. And I said, well, how did you feel? And he says, I was horrified. I was horrified by it, but he never lost faith that JFK's dream of landing a human being on the moon would be achieved, because he doesn't lose faith. Remarkably, I had the wonderful privilege of interviewing Edgar for a radio program the other day that we do at IONS. And someone called in and said to Edgar, you know, here you are, this incredible historic figure. I mean, think about this for a second. Just think about this. In the history of the universe, in recorded history, only 12 human beings have ever left the atmosphere of the Earth and walked on the moon. And you're looking at one of them. I mean, is that cool or what? Amazing, amazing. But it hasn't gone to his head. I mean, that's the most remarkable thing, is that he is the modest man who you'll read about in the first 40 years of his life, when, of course, you buy a copy of the book that will benefit both Edgar and IONS. And he's still that modest man. And so, here he was, the sixth human being to walk on the face of the moon. And what happens to him on his way back? I'm not so sure it was an epiphany as it was an emergence of what was already inside. And so rather than call him Rocket Man, I would call him the original learning man, because Edgar was open to the universe. And Edgar had an experience that only a few other individuals in the history of humanity have ever had. But why was it that he was the only person to write so eloquently about it, and to make sure that this feeling of love of one another and love of oneself and peace within oneself and between people and caring for each other, why was it that he was the only one to think and to do that what we needed was to have this continue for a long, long time, and that he established IONS as part of his legacy. I only say part of his legacy because he's far, far from done in writing his history. And so, what IONS is about is continuing to advance this vision, to continuing to advance this life force of Edgar Mitchell, which is about learning and discovery. And whether it's in the study of consciousness, or whether it's in trying to make a better world by creating a sustainable eco-village at our retreat center. Edgar and IONS are continuing to look ahead. Looking ahead into the eons, we like to call it. So that kids in white t-shirts, like that guy right there, have a planet that they can live on and breathe the air in and have clean water to swim in. And so, while he was on his way back from the moon, while he was the rocket man that Elton John spoke of, I don't know if Elton John wrote the song at that point, but it came a little bit later. He took a look at the Earth and he said, my God, we're all in this together. And unless we do something about it, it's not going to be there for future generations to enjoy. And so he came back, and shortly thereafter, he founded IONS. And the Institute of Noetic Science has continued to advance those principles. The principles of peace, inner peace, and peace between people, peace between countries. The principle of love, learn to love yourself so that you can love your community and love others. And the principle of caring. Care for one another, the way in which the Masons have done so well. And by the way, if you haven't committed today's $2 million, I have a great place for you to donate it. I'll talk to you later about that. But those are the traditions. Those are the traditions. You can't pass up opportunities, folks. Life only comes by once, all right? That we try to carry on at IONS. And they're the traditions of this good and great man. And they're traditions that are deep inside each of you if you only tap them. And that's what we will work with you in doing. That's what we'll try to do as we try to build a better world together. So I thank you so much. I urge you all to buy Edgar's autobiography and some of the autographed photographs that he has back there. And I'm not telling you that because my wife is one of the people manning the table, but I will not go to a very happy home tonight if I don't tell you to do that. So enjoy, and thank you very much for coming today, celebrating Edgar Mitchell Day.
So thank you all for coming, and hope we see you all again real soon.